Hello, everybody, and welcome to Right Here, Right Now, live Buffalo football talk presented by Forefathers Organics. I'm your host, Alex Brasky, here for the Batavia Daily and Livingston County News, where each week we'll discuss Buffalo's favorite football team, along with all the comings and goings from Orchard Park and around the NFL. Set to kick off the new league year on March 12th, but a lot of action taking place already. And as always, this episode brought to you by our friends at Forefathers Organics in Dansville.
Unlock the power of nature with Forefathers Organics, your premium CBD store. We offer the highest quality CBD and hemp products to liberate your mind, body, and soul, helping you live happy and free. Our mission is driven by excellence and transparency, using cutting-edge scientific methods to combat stress and target issues at their source. From potent ingestible CBD to soothing topicals, all our products are USDA certified organic. Discover all natural wellness from farm to table. Visit forefathersorganics.com for more information.
All right, as I said before, the new league year begins on March 12th, but as we know, the NFL never rests. The schedule seems to be year-round, keeping fans involved, keeping fans interested. It is what the NFL does best. And the latest drama to go on in the league is the fact that several players requested a trade or were released on Wednesday or in the days prior, including DK Metcalf, who really set Bills Mafia Twitter ablaze yesterday with potential scenarios, how the Bills can acquire him, what he would mean to the Bills offense, this, that, and the other thing. I think it's a skill set that, of course, would help the Bills. And Sal and I, who is going to join the show shortly, Sal Capaccio of WGR, him and I will touch on DK Metcalf's potential, the trade of DK Metcalf coming up later on today's show. We'll also touch on James Cook's seemingly steep contract demands and a few other things involving the Bills offseason as well. Along with DK Metcalf, just to name a few other big-name free agents that have hit or will perhaps hit the open market. I think all of these guys have been released. Cooper Kupp, Joey Bosa, Tyler Lockett, Darius Slay, Devontae Adams, and there's so many more, including, like I said, DK Metcalf and those that have requested trades in the early going. So a lot to keep an eye on for Bills fans. Brandon Beane, always active, as we know, always trying to stay away from that big splash that really mortgages the future. But if you ask me, I am a card-carrying member of Forget Them Picks Club. Go out, get a big-name player or two to come in here, solidify this roster, take it to a next level, as a matter of fact, and give yourself some game-changing players that you've been missing on both sides of the ball. Josh Allen has proven that he can do it alone to a certain extent, but when it comes to those late playoff situations, you need a player who can beat men one-on-one in the secondary. DK Metcalf is just that. His physical presence and his athletic ability just off the charts. And then you look at the other side of the ball, Myles Garrett, pretty much the same situation, but on the edge. Two physical specimens that really could help this team in a big way. Like I said, provide that game-changing ability that the Bills have been missing for the past several years. Also, later today, I'll be pre-recording a conversation with Nate Geary of WGR 550 when we will hop into some of the other names that may be available on the free agent or trade market. I know that Nate has been keeping his eye on who's been coming available, so interested to hear his thoughts and who might suit the Bills' fancy over the next few weeks and months. But this morning, we go to a pre-recorded conversation with Sal, who will give us some good perspective on the Bills offseason and what to expect over the next several months. And without further ado, let's dive in to my conversation with Sal Capaccio. And 3. All right, joined by Sal Capaccio of WGR 550. You hear him every Sunday, Monday, Thursday. The Bills play on the sideline there. Sal, how are you? Thank you for joining me as always.
Yeah, days that end in Y are going to find me on the radio somewhere, I guess.
Yeah, and you're about to be traveling into all different parts of the world as well. Now games in Germany, the UK, just everywhere now. So I'm sure in the years to come, you'll be the traveling man, Sal Capaccio. And at the end of this, we'll ask you about your Italy trip coming up as well, which is certainly something exciting for you, your family, and everybody that is planning to attend. But let's hop right into it. James Cook, that's obviously the big talking point that a lot of Bills fans are talking about the last few days. Saquon Barkley goes out and gets himself $20 million a year, really revitalizing the running back market. And James Cook was already pleading his case for $15 million a year on social media, seemingly the minute the season ended. Obviously, Cook one more year on his deal. But with Barkley getting this huge chunk of change, does that give Cook more leverage in your mind? It obviously probably comes down to if another team is willing to pay him what he's asking, but it does likely entrench him in his stance at the very least at this point.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think that, the market certainly moves up a little bit, it kind of trends up, but we're still talking about, even if you take Saquon over $20 million a year now, $20 million a year, and then you have Christian McCaffrey at 19, then that's it. I mean, 15 is still number 3. So I still think it's a lot of money. I don't think the Bills are interested in giving him $15 million a year, nor do I think they should be interested. But certainly if you look at it from James Cook's side, Alex, that, hey, here's another guy getting paid. All this is doing is going up. I'm worth 15. If he's worth 20, I'm worth 15. But man, you look at some of the running back salaries. I mean, let's just say somebody called me on the radio today and said they think James Cook is a top 10 running back. I think that's totally fair. The top 10 running backs, if you take the 10th guy, it's like less than $9 million a year for the top 10 salaries.
Derrick Henry at $8 million a year.
Yeah. So, I mean, I just don't, he's not a bell cow guy. He's really good. He's really good for the Buffalo Bills, but there's things that, he runs behind a really good offensive line. He doesn't play a lot as much on third down when they have Ty Johnson available, obviously, and what he was able to do this year, 2-minute offense, things like that. So I don't want to sit here and give you the negatives of James Cook, but I think we have to look at what he truly is and where his value matches that.
Yeah, I certainly agree with you on that point. And I also agree that I don't think the Bills in any realm or sense of thought that they'll pay James Cook $15 million. I think they'd rather sit in that $8 to $10 million per year range. And even that would probably be on the high side. But like I said before, it really comes down to whether or not one of these other teams is going to break the bank and pay James Cook what he's asking for it, or at least entertain that conversation. Do you see any team out there giving him what he wants? You said that you don't see the Bills, and I agree with you there, but we've seen some of these teams spend some wild money in the past, and with the salary cap continuing to climb, a player who led the league in rushing touchdowns, who seems to be on the rise, seemingly rounding into at least a complete runner and has that receiving element of his game as well. The pass protection obviously lacking, but do you think there's a chance that someone entertains that conversation with James Cook and either sparks a trade before this season starts, or do you think he eventually gets that kind of money on the open market?
Well, I think certainly there might be a team, but I think we're putting the cart way before the horse here. Yeah. It's important to remember James Cook is under contract to the Bills. It doesn't matter if a team is willing to give him that money now, Alex. Like they have him under contract, and the only thing I think the Bills have to kind of be weary of here is how messy could he make it, right? Where it's already starting to, obviously, Brandon Beane said, we like to keep things in-house, business in-house, and we love James. He's a grown man. He can handle it the way he wants. They don't like to do business like that. The Bills aren't really used to having these contractual situations. They haven't had them very much in the Brandon Beane era. The closest one might be Jordan Poyer holding out of OTAs, really, is what it came down to. But, yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter if there's 31 other teams willing to pay James Cook $15 million a year. The Bills have him under contract for $5 million this year. And if they say you're playing for $5 million, and that's the way it's got to work, he could sit out all he wants. He's going to be costing himself a lot of money. And then guess what happens at the end of next year? They can franchise tag him. Right. And the franchise tag is only $13 million this year. Now, it should be about $14 million next year, maybe a little higher. Still not the 15 that he's asking for, he wants, basically. They could literally franchise him next year at probably a lesser cost than what he is saying he wants now. I think the interesting part about your question is the trade point, which is if there is a team that says, look, we'd give him that kind of money. If you guys don't want to do that and you're willing to make a deal here, then I think Brandon Beane has to determine at that point, where is this truly going? Can we find common ground? And if not, I have to start entertaining that thought.
And the reason why I think they're going to have to entertain at least giving him maybe more than they would be comfortable with when he does hit the open market after this year, obviously, he's the second most impressive offensive playmaker, in my view, on this Bills offense. It's not loaded with offensive playmakers. You have Josh Allen, obviously, at the head of the snake, but beyond that, you have a lot of glue guys, and guys like James Cook are few and far between. And I think that is what will lead the Bills to at least consider climbing the ladder in terms of what they're willing to pay him. But another player that is now on the open market that could potentially come in here and provide some offensive firepower. You mentioned it to me before we started recording. Christian Kirk released, and he's, I believe, at the TGL as part of Josh Allen's bachelor party, obviously one of his very good friends, and he's spoken on that before. And there's always some off-season recruiting going on, and with Kirk being released, Allen and Kirk being in the same location at the same time. First question, do you think Kirk would help this offense, and if so, to what level? And do you see that being a body of water that Brandon Beane dips his toe into this offseason?
Sure, I think he's going to have to go out and get another receiver or two. I mean, look, they have 6 guys under contract right now. Most of them are guys that were on the 3 of them were guys in the practice squad last year that really didn't play very much. Then Mac Hollins is a free agent, pending free agent. I would expect him to probably come back. I think he wants to be in Buffalo. You could probably get that deal done. I don't know if Amari Cooper will be. I think that's, a different question. Probably not. But where are you getting other guys from, right? Can you really count on, is Keon Coleman going to take that next step that you really talked about this year after coming back from the injury and not being the guy that you thought, that you saw early on? Is Curtis Samuel going to be able to take that next step after having an injury this year and not being able to really have the kind of season they wanted? How about Dalton Kincaid from the tight end position as a pass catcher? So they're going to have to, I wouldn't expect them to do nothing at wide receiver. I also don't expect them to go out and give a whole bunch of money to somebody. So I could rule out a trade for T. Higgins or something like that. That's not going to happen. Christian Kirk might be the kind of guy. I think the question for him would be, is he redundant from type of guys you already have, like Khalil Shakir, playing in the slot a lot, right? That's really what he does mostly. He's only 28, though. This is not a really old player. He's 28. And yeah, I think the relationship with Josh Allen might matter, where Josh says, look, I train with this guy all the time. I'm throwing him footballs in the offseason. We work out a lot, things like that. And I don't exactly know if they actually do that. I know they hang out a lot. That could matter, that they already have some chemistry built in already. And, he's got some speed. He could be a bit of a field stretcher. The Bills need a little bit of speed. So sure, I think I could see it. There's a lot of names out there. The wide receiver market is getting a little bit more robust, but that could also drive the price down for a lot of these guys, right? Whether it's Darius Slay, Josh Palmer, De'Ami Brown. I think these are guys that Brandon Beane could take a look at and say, okay, what are the prices on those guys? Do I want to, add to the group with one of them?
And quickly, just, you don't have to elaborate too far, any interest in one of these aging receivers that have hit the open market? It seems like you said, it's a robust free agent wide receiver market, and a lot of them on the other side of 30 or at least trending that way. Devontae Adams comes to mind for me. I wrote about him in Bills Digest preemptively before the Jets released him. I said, if they do release him, that'd be a player I have my eye on, just because there were reports that the Bills were interested in his services last season when he was leaving Las Vegas before he hooked up with Aaron Rodgers. Is he or another of the aging wide receivers, any of those guys, do you think that fits what the Bills are trying to do, or do you think they're trying to go younger at the position?
Yeah, it depends on what aging means and who you're referring to, right? I've always been a Keenan Allen fan, but what does that look like at this point of his career? You bring up Devontae Adams. I love Devontae Adams. I think he's terrific. There's been some numbers though that really show that his game isn't quite what it used to be at this point. So you kind of have to really wash that. But then you have Josh Allen, and he's throwing to him. So how does that change things? So yeah, I mean, I wouldn't rule it out. I wouldn't rule out the Bills getting an older wide receiver. They traded for Amari Cooper at the trade deadline. He was in his 10th year. But I would say this, if they're going to go that route, I think Amari Cooper might be the guy that you'd rather have. But I think Amari Cooper might command a little bit too high of a salary for this team. So, he's been in the league long enough and put enough time in that I think there's some team out there that might say, hey, you know what? He's only a couple of years removed from like 1,100 yards. Let's give him a little bit of a payday.
And before we dive into a few Bills pending free agents, let's continue with some free agents out there that Brandon Beane could acquire from other teams that they played for this past season. Josh Sweat comes to mind. You asked me free agents that could help make the Bills defense bigger and stronger this offseason. Sweat came to mind for me just for his pass rushing ability, but perhaps it didn't link to the substance of your question about making this defense bigger and stronger. In that vein, does Sweat fit that kind of thing for you? And who else would you be looking at maybe on the interior to help make this Bills defense and specifically the defensive line bigger and stronger, as it seems like they're trending toward, at least trying to do this season?
Yeah, I think bigger and stronger is more on the interior for what they want to be. They want to be bigger. They want to be tougher. They want to be stronger. They want to be better at the point of attack. They want to be a little bit longer there. I think when it comes to edge, sure. But to me, edge is more like, is there a guy out there they really think can get to the passer a little bit better? And whether that's bigger and stronger, I think that's really, what that specific spot comes out to. You asked about Josh Sweat. Well, Josh Sweat he's kind of a late bloomer, so to speak, for way his career arc has gone. But he made himself a lot of money this year, and especially in the playoffs and the Super Bowl. That's probably out of the price range of what the Bills want to do at this point. And then you have to think, like, is he the same? If you get him, like, can you trust that those numbers are going to kind of translate to him, being in Buffalo? So I'm not so sure they want to play in that field, but, if they really want to go that route, a guy I look at is, speaking of aging, is Khalil Mack somebody that they would take a look at? He's 33, going to be 34, I think it is. Played at the University of Buffalo, obviously, everybody knows. He's still, what does he have left in the tank? His numbers weren't that great last year, but he's not far removed from still being able to get to the quarterback. I look on the interior, though. Boy, I know he's a little bit older, but Calais Campbell still played really well. And he can play outside and inside. He's kind of a guy that kind of can do a little bit both. He can do a lot of different things for you. So I look at a guy like that and say, is that somebody they'd be interested in? How about a former Bill, Poona Ford? He goes off, and I hear all these people going, I can't believe they let Poona Ford go. I mean, who would have thought he'd have the year he kind of had and, playing for the Chargers, right? And I think that, that could be a guy that maybe you revisit on something like that. Javon Hargrave's a free agent. He's in San Francisco. I will tell you, from what I know, several years ago, this regime, like when he was a free agent, I think he went to Philly at the time. The Bills were very interested in him, but that's years ago. And you don't know. Maybe they go back to intel on that and say, hey, didn't get him then. We still like him now. That's a guy that they could go after. So, yeah, I do think that they're going to look to get bigger, to get stronger, to get more stout up front. That could also come in the form of the draft, but I think they want to have immediate returns on some of these guys as well.
Yeah, Poona Ford, he never seemed to get the opportunity in Buffalo, and he goes elsewhere and really explodes. And you talk about Khalil Mack, he was another player. I mentioned Josh Sweat. Mack was another player on the edge that I wrote about in Bills Digest, our free agency frenzy. Entering his age 34 season, 11 years in the league. His average annual value of his previous contract, $19 million, but over the cap projects his market value at around $11 million per year. So take that for what it's worth. 2023, 17 sacks. I think he had 6 this past year, but certainly a player that could still explode, has the Buffalo ties. That interests me as well. Now, if you look at the Bills free agents to be on the defensive line, is there anyone there that you would be interested in bringing back? It was really a pieced together unit this season. You have Austin Johnson, 27% of the snaps. He's on the market. Quentin Jefferson, once he returned to Buffalo, 23% of the snaps. Jordan Phillips, 13% of the snaps once he returned. And then you have DeJuan Smoot on the edge, who was injured for much of the season, but played about 30% of the snaps, giving you a bit of inside-outside versatility. Any of those 4 you'd be interested in bringing back? I think Smoot would be the only one that I would really entertain. I think the 3 defensive tackles I'd probably move on from and try to look for different answers there.
Well, look, whether you bring back a guy like Jordan Phillips or Quentin Jefferson, you're going to sign a guy just like them anyway, right? So I'm always of the mindset, and not like Jordan Phillips super old. I think he's 31, 32 now, but I'm totally fine with them not having Jordan Phillips on the roster. But you're going to have guys like that. That's just the way the nature of the beast. And you can get guys that are minimum salary guys. Now, he's been in the league long enough, a guy like Jordan Phillips, for example, where that minimum salary is going to be a little higher than somebody. But, to me, it's whether you get him, you bring him back, or it's somebody else. You got to have guys just like that. They're going to bring a bunch of guys to camp. They'll go roll into camp with probably 10 defensive linemen or something like that, or even more total defensive linemen. But how many defensive tackles? 8, 9 defensive tackles, something like that. So they're going to do that. I agree with you. DeJuan Smoot is the one guy that I would look at and say, for what he was supposed to be for the Bills last year, like we could really use that again. He is a little bit older, but he didn't have the season they wanted. He had some injuries last year. But if you remember early in the season, one of the things that Sean McDermott said was losing him for a couple of games to start the year hurt because he was setting their third down defense up front. But this is a guy they really put a lot of faith into. Bam, shows up and he can do all these different things for them inside, outside. I agree with you. So Smoot would be the guy that I think that, if I had to look at any of them, I'd say, okay, that's a guy. But honestly, out of the 6, Smoot, Casey Toohill, Austin Johnson, Jordan Phillips, Quentin Jefferson, Ilianku. If the Bills didn't have any of them on their roster, I wouldn't sweat it in 2025. But of course, we know Ilianku is going to be on the practice squad because he always is, right? So, I mean, it just feels like there's always going to be guys like that. But I wouldn't necessarily, it wouldn't matter, to me if it's that guy or somebody else, but you got to have guys like that.
How about Damar Hamlin? Where are you with him? Hearing from Brandon Beane at the Combine, maybe I'm looking too much into it. It doesn't seem like he'll be back. It seems like after he fulfilled that starting role this past season with Cole Bishop set to hopefully take the bull by the horns in that respect this year, it seems like Hamlin may go out and try to look for starter money in a starter opportunity. Where do you see that? Do you see it the same way, or do you think that's just me looking too far into Beane's comments?
No, I agree with you. And I've thought about this, really all year, that I would think that this might be Damar Hamlin's last year in Buffalo because he's probably not going to be the starter again this year, considering how they feel about Cole Bishop and the fact that he should be, rising to that level. And I do think that they'll probably go a little bit younger at safety anyway, bring somebody in just like they did Cole Bishop last year. Maybe not a second round pick, but they probably want to replenish there. They also have Cam Lewis, who is a safety, but he is obviously a backup nickel corner. That's it. I would say numbers wise, they got to replenish that position. Damar was a good soldier, so to speak, right? He's the kind of guy that he's going to do exactly what he's coached to do. He's not the most gifted athlete in the world, but he knew the system, and that's why he started. And he actually played pretty well for the team this year. He had a couple interceptions. He made a couple of nice plays, but they need to get more athletic and they need to have bigger plays and bigger opportunity at safety. And I think that they're probably looking for that. And good for Damar Hamlin. He's, after everything that happened, obviously playing out his rookie contract, getting to the point where he is. So the way I look at it right now, I doubt Damar Hamlin is back with the Buffalo Bills. But it wouldn't certainly shock me. It would depend on if he didn't have any other offers out there and said, hey, that's still the best spot for me, and I can come in, I can compete, with Cole Bishop. And look what happened last year. I mean, because Cole Bishop had that injury early on and Mike Edwards had an injury, Mike Edwards was going to start, not Damar Hamlin, right? All of a sudden there's an injury. Damar Hamlin finds himself as a starter. That could happen. I keep thinking Damar Hamlin and the Pittsburgh Steelers make sense. Mike Tomlin has known him since he was very young. He grew up in Pittsburgh. Damar Hamlin did. He went to Central Catholic, same high school as Dan Marino out there. He went to Pitt, obviously. So I keep thinking Damar Hamlin and Pitt make a lot of sense.
Yeah, I'm with you there. And as far as Cole Bishop is concerned, if he's able to take the reins there and play alongside Taylor Rapp for a full season, that could be one of the most electrifying safety duos in terms of their ability to come up and hit. That could be something else that could make this Bills defense a little bit bigger and stronger this season with Bishop on the back end finishing the job. But as we're recording this on Wednesday at about 1 p.m., DK Metcalf has requested a trade, and the Seahawks have agreed to explore options. That per Tom Pelissero. We talked about some of the aging receivers. I don't know if I put him into that bucket. He's still probably in his prime, much more so than Devontae Adams. Any interest there?
I like DK Metcalf a lot. I think the contract is probably what holds you back here. Yeah. Let me look at his contract. Do you have it in front of you?
I don't. I didn't have time, but I think you're correct. I think when I was looking the other day at the possibility of the Bills trading for him, I think he's going to be looking at least for a new deal.
Well, even if he's not, he's got 1 year left with a base salary of $18 million.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what the trading team is taking on immediately for him at the base salary. And you could adjust the contract. Yeah, for sure. No doubt. And if DK Metcalf and you work out a deal and he comes in and you adjust the contract, he's a good player. I mean, who wouldn't want a DK Metcalf on their team? But it just doesn't seem like and scream like a move the Bills want to make. You know what I mean? But who knows? I mean, like I said earlier, I think they're going to try to upgrade the wide receivers position in some way. But maybe, I don't know if you get the same feeling I did listening to Brandon Beane talk about wide receiver at the Combine. Didn't seem like it was such a priority like it might have been last year.
I'd love for them to get Matthew Golden, though. That's been my draft crush. I'm a big wide receiver speed guy. I know those guys don't always work out, but that's something the Bills need on the offensive side of the ball. But Sal, before we wrap up this conversation, tell us about your Italy trip. I've never been out of the country with the exception of Canada. It's something I want to start doing in the near future, traveling abroad, albeit safely in today's day and age. You've been to Italy before. What's your favorite part of traveling there? What are you most excited in terms of this trip? And tell us a little bit about what you have planned.
Well, what's going on is thanks to Odyssey and WGR and Colette Travel, they came together with this plan and said, "Hey, we're going to send you to Italy with a bunch of listeners. What do you think?" I'm like, "That's pretty cool, right?" So we did this campaign to do it, and people signed up. We did a really cool presentation over at the Richardson Hotel in Buffalo, which is beautiful. And this is going to be like an all-inclusive kind of thing where what I mean by all-inclusive is you don't have to worry about anything. The flights there are taken care of, door-to-door travel, hotel to hotel. We're going to like 7 or 8 different cities over 10 days, however many it is. We're going to Rome and Venice and Florence and Tuscany and Umbria, staying overnight in Lake Como. And like your luggage is going to go, somebody's going to take care of it and handle it for you from every hotel. It's going to be amazing. So we're doing a cooking class and drinking wine. But my family, my wife and son are going with me too. But what's really I'm looking forward to is this is going to be Buffalo people with us, right? Mm-hmm. And I think the numbers on it, I think there's over 20 people signed up going with us, which is really cool. So it's going to be a really great time. And I'm going to be in Italy with a lot of Bills fans. And I've heard from the Bills backers of Italy. I've met them before.
Forza Bills.
Yeah, for sure. And said, "Hey, when you come over here, let's get together for sure." We love traveling. My wife is from Germany. She's from Europe. So we've been there. My son is 11. He's been to Europe 4 times. And that includes going to the Bills game in London a couple of years ago, by the way. And I understand everybody's schedules and means and everything. It's always different for everybody. But one thing I think that people should experience is, traveling, seeing the world, experiencing different cultures. We just got back from a cruise we went to the Bahamas, then we went to Mexico, went to Belize and Cozumel and Costa Maya. And on this cruise, there were some excursions we could choose. And I was looking at them like, oh, I got to do this. And really one of the things I've always wanted to do and finally did was go see some Mayan ruins. Mm-hmm. So Max and I, we climbed them, and my wife, she was there too, obviously, but I had pictures of Max, on the Mayan ruins and looking up top, and it was great. We're looking over everything, really cool stuff. So yeah, we'll be headed to Italy this fall. And it's going to be a great trip. So I'm really glad that we're able to do it. It's closed out now. People can't sign up, but who knows? Maybe they say, "Hey, we're going to do one last push or chance." And if people are interested, they can, listen in for that.
Where in the world is Sal Capaccio?
Yeah.
Soon to be Italy and Rome, Venice, and the like. Sal, thanks for taking some time to join us. You can hear on WGR, and I'm sure everywhere else that he is gracious enough to join, as he did with us here, right now. Sal, thanks a lot.
You got it, buddy.
Sorry, I was muted that entire time. So we'd like to thank Sal Capaccio for joining us for that conversation. He provided a lot of good perspective regarding DK Metcalf and a lot of other topics regarding the Bills offseason. We only briefly touched on the DK Metcalf conversation due to that news breaking while we were on with Sal. So we weren't able to dive in as deeply as we wanted, had some other topics picked out. We will be joined by WGR's Nate Geary later today for a pre-recorded conversation. We'll dive in to many more of the free agents that are on the open market, that have requested trades, that have been released, set to be released, this, that, and the other thing. But as you saw while I was muted, John Robert saying that the Seahawks want a first and third round pick. He personally thinks it's too much. Like I said before, I'm a card-carrying member of the Forget Them Picks Club. You have to go out and do what you can to acquire a game-changing player like this. And I don't think the Seahawks are getting a first and third round pick for DK Metcalf. That's simply too much in my opinion. He is still on the positive side of 30. He's never recorded fewer than 900 yards in a season in his career, coming off a year in which he put up 992 yards, 5 touchdowns in 15 games for the Seahawks, caught 66 passes over those 15 games. 1,100 yards the year before, 1,300 yards in 2020. That was his career high. In 2020, 2021, back-to-back years with 10-plus touchdowns. He's a 2-time Pro Bowler. And like I said, entering his age 27 season. And that first and third round pick, I think that's too much to ask for the Seahawks. But I think it's going to be somewhere in the middle. And don't you know, the Bills have 2 second-round picks in the 2025 NFL draft. So if you're the Bills, offer up one of those second-round picks, maybe a deeper pick in a future draft, or heck, even in the 2025 NFL draft. The Bills entering this draft with 8 selections. So if you're Brandon Beane, do whatever you can. DK Metcalf is a player who could come in and immediately change the scope of this offense. He's a matchup beater down the field. He's a physical specimen with great athletic ability. He is what you're looking for to pair with Josh Allen. Could you imagine 2 players, Josh Allen and DK Metcalf, standing beside one another in the huddle, and Allen throwing passes to Metcalf? Boy, that would be mighty intimidating for opposing defenses, and specifically opposing secondaries and opposing defensive coordinators to contend with. But yeah, for me, the picks, and people have always have also brought up the whole salary cap conversation. We've seen it before. We see people discuss it all the time about how the salary cap is not real. But this is a player, and Myles Garrett is a player, where you need to finagle the salary cap. You need to put yourself out there in terms of trading the draft picks. And that's not to mention Brandon Beane's inefficiency at the top of the drafts in recent years. So I think you got to move heaven and earth for this guy. You got to go after him. You got to put all your cards on the table. And if it's going to take a first and third round pick, that may be too tall of an asking price. I think I'd give Brandon Beane and the Bills an out on that one. But if you can settle on a second round pick plus, and then find a way to get DK Metcalf the money that he's looking for, not to say it's a no-brainer, because it is kind of a tough, convoluted situation, but that's a player you bring in. That's a player that can change the face of this offense and hopefully get you to that next level, which would be the Super Bowl appearance that you've been in search for. But one other item that I want to touch on, thank goodness I caught myself that I want to go back and see how long I was muted for. I might have to post the outtake of that on Twitter, just screaming into the void here in my apartment. Certainly not one of my finer moments. And that was after I struggled off the jump with Sal. I couldn't figure out how to get him to go full screen. I had him full screen, then I had him off the screen, then technology, usually one of my strong suits, but really, really struggling today. Boy, jeez, that would have been embarrassing if I remained muted for the remainder of the show. But Mitch Morse, after 10 seasons, retires. He spent 1 year this past season with the Jacksonville Jaguars, and obviously a good soldier for the Buffalo Bills during his time in Buffalo. Spent 5 seasons with the Bills, never played fewer than 13 games, sustained numerous concussions over that time, but to remain on the field for 13 games plus while dealing with those concussion injuries just tells you the type of player that Mitch Morse is and the type of teammate and leader that Mitch Morse was. No, I do not condone playing with or through that significant of an injury, particularly to the head. Yeah, that's something that you really have to be concerned with down the road. But Mitch Morse always there for his teammates, always there for the media as well. Always a good soundbite, someone who could give you very good perspective and go deep into a situation that needed explaining from a player's perspective. So Mitch Morse, after 5 seasons with the Bills, 1 season with the Jaguars, and 4 previous with the Kansas City Chiefs, he calls it a career. He gets his 10-year tenure with the NFL. So mighty impressive stuff for Mitch Morse, and a salute to him as he rides off into the sunset and enjoys his family here over the next few years. So we'd like to thank Sal for joining us. If you're lucky enough to join him on that Italy trip, boy, am I jealous. I'll have to get out there sooner rather than later. I'm a Polish boy, so I'm going to want to visit some of the places in Poland, maybe before I get to Italy on my bucket list. But Italy's certainly up there. It's a historic country that obviously many people have good things to say about. So I'd like to thank Sal, and I'd like to thank you for sticking with me through muting myself for, it had to have been at least 2 or 3 minutes. I'm going to go back and check that. But thank you for sticking with me. And once again, before we get out of here, we'd like to thank our friends Forefathers Organics in Dansville.
Unlock the power of nature with Forefathers Organics, your premium CBD store. We offer the highest quality CBD and hemp products to liberate your mind, body, and soul, helping you live happy and free. Our mission is driven by excellence and transparency, using cutting-edge scientific methods to combat stress and target issues at their source. From potent ingestible CBD to soothing topicals, all our products are USDA certified organic. Discover all natural wellness from farm to table. Visit forefathersorganics.com for more information.
All right, we're going to take a step back. We're going to regroup. We're going to see what we can do to work out some of the kinks that we experienced in this podcast. And we're going to welcome in Nate Geary later this afternoon, and we'll speak with him regarding many of the topics perhaps that we discussed today, but we'll branch off and bring in some more exclusive content as well right here, right now. But thank you for joining us, and we will see you next time.